All set? Nuclear Forum, Balkan, Burch. Welcome to the Balkan Forum on Nuclear Disarmament. If you are joining us through Zoom, you can enable the translation option for Albanian or English. My name is Rinor Jani, and I'm the program coordinator for the Nuclear Disarmament Advocacy and Research Program at Pathways to Peace. Pathways to Peace, PTP, is an international peace-building, educational, and consulting organization. For over 4 decades, PTP has been actively making peace a lived reality. PTP is a UN-designated peace messenger organization and has consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. Pathways, it is truly an honor to be here at the Bunk Art Museum, a former nuclear bunker that was built here in Tirana, Albania. During my visit to Hiroshima last year, I had the opportunity to participate in a training on nuclear weapons and global security. I had the rare opportunity to meet with the Hiroshima survivors of the atomic bombing from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Listening to their testimonies of not only survival, but also their tremendous efforts to help rebuild their city that was destroyed was life-changing for me. I was inspired because they detailed that after losing everything and almost everyone, they still rose above with unshakable resiliency. Walking through the city was truly remarkable because I could feel the power of the resiliency at every corner and a sense of profound peace. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are truly prime examples of a phoenix that rises from the ashes. Today, our world is experiencing rising concerns of nuclear war throughout different regions. The war in Ukraine is reminding humanity again that nuclear deterrence is not an effective measure for global security, and we must abolish nuclear weapons. There are now more countries in Europe, such as Belarus, that have obtained nuclear weapons through nuclear sharing programs. This type of escalation only increases the risk of nuclear disaster and miscalculation. The lack of action among nuclear-armed states for multilateral cooperation on nuclear disarmament has shown the world that we cannot wait for them to responsibly lead the way for a world free of nuclear weapons. According to the ICANN 2022 Nuclear Weapons Global Spending Report, 9 nuclear-armed states spent a total of $82.9 billion on nuclear weapons. That costs $157,000 per minute and over $226 million per day. By the time you start and finish your lunch break at work, millions of dollars will have been spent by nuclear-armed states to produce and maintain nuclear weapons. If you take a 30-minute break, $4,170,000 will have been spent. If you take an hour break, $9,420,000 will have been spent. That is a really expensive cup of coffee when you do the math. A price that all humanity pays for, because instead of those funds going towards important human needs, they are actually going towards destructive technologies that do not help improve human lives across the world. On July 7, 2017, 122 states voted within the UN General Assembly for the adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. It is the first legally binding treaty that bans the usage, production, and testing of nuclear weapons. The TPNW complements the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, and it fulfills Article 6, which calls for a legally binding treaty for the abolition of nuclear weapons and its uses. I'd like to address the following section of my remarks in Albanian to the Albanian government. Kultura kapës së peace, kam kënaqësi të njoftoj se keni publikuar një raport auditues që tregon krimin e publikut shqiptar me lidhje me traktatin e kalimit të armëve bërtamor TPNW. Studimi tregon se 98% e qytetarëve shqiptar dëshirojnë që Shqipëria të bashkohet TPNW, i cili ndalon përdorimin, posedimin, testimin dhe transferimin e armëve bërtamor në bashkë të ligjit ndërkombëtar. 90% e tjerë besojnë se Shqipëria duhet të jetë ndërvendi të parë anatar të NATO-s që të nënshkruar TPNW. Ulëmtimi gjithashtu tregon se një shumicë dërmyes, pre 88% e shqiptarëve të intervistuar mendojnë se Shqipëria nuk do të ishte i përgatitur për të përballuar emergjencinë që do të rezultonte nëse armat bërthamor do të shpërthenin diku në botë. TPNW u miratua në vitin 2017 dhe që prej asaj kohe qeveria shqiptare ka shfakuar kundërshtim ndaj traktatit dhe besojnë në një përqasje shkallëzore drejt qarmatimit bërthamor. Koja ka vërtetuar se me këtë përqasje thjesht ngrumbullohen ma shumë arsenal dhe ma shumë vend përfitojnë armë bërthamor përmes programeve të ndarjes bërthamor. Tani ka ardhur koja që Shqipëria të ndërmarrë apo praktik drejt në nënshkrimin të TPNW duke u bashkuar diskutimeve rreth traktatit. Së pari, propozoj që Shqipëria të bëhet një shtet vëzhgues në takimin e ditë të shteteve pallë në TPNW, që do të mbahet një selin e OQB-së në New York gjatë muajit nëntor të këtë vitit. Anëtarësimi i Shqipërisë në NATO nuk i pengon vendin që do të bëhet shtet vëzhgues, sepse disa vende të NATO-s, si Gjermania, Norvegjia, Finlanda, Suida, Belgjika dhe Olanda, ishin shtetit vëzhguese në takimin e parë të shteteve pallë në TPNW në Vienna, Austri, vitin e kaluar. Kolegu im i OQB-s, zotëri Rene Holbach, nga zira e OQB se për qarmatimin do të hap detaj të mëteshme mbi procesin e përgjithshëm se si shtetit anatar mund të bëhen shtetit vëzhguese. Vitin e kaluar unë dërgova një letër të bashkë nënshkruar nga 11 organizata të shoqërisë civile shqiptare, kryetarëve parlamentar të Komisionit për Sigurinë Kombëtar, Komisionit për Punët të Jashtme dhe nën Komisionit për të Drejtat e Njerëzit. Duke mbërë thirrje për një seancë publik parlamentar mbi TPNW dhe rolin e Shqipërisë në qarmatimin bërthamor global. Propoz një seancë publik parlamentar në besojmë se është i rëndësishme që të krijohet një grup parlamentar ndërpraktik për qarmatimin bërthamor. Mesazhi për të gjithë zyrtarët e qeverisë dhe parlamentarit është i thjeshtë. Nëse më të vërtet kujdeseni për mbrojtjen dhe mirëqenin e gjithësve tuaj, atëre duhet të merrni masaj për të adresuar kërcënimin eksistencial që paraqesin armët bërthamor,
Ne besojmë se është e rëndësishme të kemi mbështetjen e Parlamentit për TPNW dhe të zhvillojmë diskutim formal me shoqërinë civil. We also believe that government officials at every level, such as municipalities, can also take action to support nuclear disarmament. Cities are the largest targets for nuclear threats and attacks because they are the economic engines of each nation and they carry the largest human populations. The destructive impact of only one nuclear bomb can cause millions of casualties and destroy an entire city. It would only take 10 seconds for the fireball of the bomb to expand to its maximum capacity. One step that municipal mayors and leaders can take is to join the Mayors for Peace network and sign the ICANN Cities Appeal. In 1982, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki established Mayors for Peace. It is a nonpartisan global network of municipalities that holds consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Since its establishment, Mayors for Peace has expanded its membership and worked in solidarity with its member cities to call for the realization of a world free from nuclear weapons and lasting world peace. Presided by the mayor of Hiroshima and vice presided by the mayor of Nagasaki, along with 10 other mayors of cities from across the world, as of August 1st of this year, Mayors for Peace has grown to 8,271 member cities from 166 countries around the world. I am pleased to propose to the mayor of Tirana, Mayor Erion Velay, Deputy Mayor Keti Luarasi, and the city of Tirana to join the Mayors for Peace network. I have the honor to present to you a letter from the mayor of Hiroshima and the mayor of Nagasaki. Mayor Matsui and Mayor Suzuki, encouraging your accession and to join 8,271 other mayors that hold the same values of realizing a world without nuclear weapons, building safe and resilient cities, promoting a culture of peace. The city of Tirana would be joining other Albanian cities, such as Vlora, that have already joined the Mayors for Peace network. In addition to joining the Mayors for Peace network, I would also like to propose to the city of Tirana to sign the ICANN Cities Appeal. This ICANN Cities Appeal was created by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICANN, a coalition of over 650 organizations from over 110 countries across the world that are working for nuclear disarmament and the adherence of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. The ICANN Cities Appeal gives municipal leaders an opportunity to directly voice their support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and aims to promote initiatives that municipalities can take to stand up against nuclear weapons and explore measures which promote nuclear disarmament. I have the honor to present to you a letter from Daniel Hogsta, the Interim Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICANN, calling on Mayor Velay and the city of Tirana to sign the ICANN Cities Appeal and to join hundreds of other cities that have signed it from across the world. I hope through this important forum that there will be an increase in Balkan leadership for nuclear disarmament from regional governments and civil society. May we all continue our work for a world free of nuclear weapons with a consciousness of peace. I would like to now give the floor to our conference moderator and acclaimed journalist, Blendi Salai. Blendi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Rinor. We have a video to watch first, which is a video from the International Committee of the Red Cross. Let's watch that together.
In the first second, the white light is blinding, the heat immense. In the first day, fires consume the city and there's no way to fight them. Your skin is badly charred. In the first week, those hospitals that are still functioning are overwhelmed and can't treat the injured. Others who seem fine suddenly fall ill and die from radiation sickness. In the first year, radiation has seeped into the water and the soil. Crops and animals are contaminated. In 10 years, congratulations. You might not have leukemia or another cancer, but many of your friends do. You fear it will come any day. In 30 years, you look at your children wondering if you've passed on the effects of radiation. In 70 years, you're still seeing your doctor for checkups. He says it's a miracle you're still alive. The humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons are horrific and span generations. It's time to ban them now.
Well, as we start with our honored guests, I'd like to welcome you to this remarkable venue. I hope your journey into the underground was devoid of bouts of claustrophobia, and I trust you'll endure the dampness and absence of sunlight throughout the proceeding. The society that constructed this nuclear shelter acknowledged the possibility of a full-scale nuclear war that could potentially devastate the majority of humanity, compelling them to seek refuge underground and behind concrete walls. That specter seemed unimaginable, almost belonging to the past, and that was just a few months ago. The conflict in Ukraine and the escalation of geopolitics have once again brought the possibility of nuclear war to the forefront. The Balkan Forum on Nuclear Disarmament is advocating for a world where no country has nuclear capabilities, a world where total destruction is unimaginable and impossible, and all countries pledge to refrain from producing such weapons. Does this vision appear unattainable, merely a product of pacifist imagination? The opposite scenario would involve a world where structures like the one that we are currently inside become a necessity. Today, we will exchange our viewpoints on realizing that vision of a world without nuclear weapons and lay out a pathway for each of us to contribute to that overarching goal. This way, we can avoid spending the rest of our lives in the damp and sunless underground. You know, as a journalist, I often take place in many events, many conferences. I've met Keti and such events, the ambassador as well, and they range from topics about children health to women's rights and agriculture and everything between. But this one, on nuclear weapons and disarmament is something that reaches everybody, and it's important because it's as important as life itself. So I'm very glad to be here, and before I give the floor to the ambassador of Ukraine, I'd like to say a few words about him. Ambassador Volodymyr Skurov was first a researcher at the Institute of Linguistics at the National Academy of Science of Ukraine in 1992. In 1995, he was appointed as the first secretary of the Department of Western Europe in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. He then began to work through various diplomatic positions in the Foreign Ministry and also in Greece. In 2020, he presented his credentials to become the ambassador of Ukraine to the Republic of Albania. Ambassador Volodymyr completed his studies at the Taras Shevchenko National University in Kiev and at the Center for Diplomatic and Strategic Studies in Greece. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear organizers, distinguished participants of the forum, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to say that it is an honor for me to be with you today. Understanding the importance of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, we must admit that today is the 548th day of a full-scale aggression unleashed by the NPT nuclear power against an NPT non-nuclear state. This unprovoked and unjustified aggression of Russia against Ukraine has divided our world into before and after. Before, none of us believed that a real threat of nuclear war would come back to our daily life. Critical infrastructure facilities, public and residential areas, even schools and hospitals are under missiles and bombs attacks every day. Thousands of educational and medical institutions, water and electricity networks were damaged and destroyed. Investigation into more than 68,000 war crimes and crimes of aggression committed since 24th of February 2022 has been launched so far. Among them, the cases of killing of 9,000 civilians, including 500 children. These figures are growing daily due to unceasing heavy shelling and airstrikes on the Ukrainian civil infrastructure. The Russian leadership openly threatens the world with its ability to use nuclear weapons, backed by the clear calls to do so by the Russian state media. Think tanks and experts widely argue on what type of nuclear weapons, tactical or strategic, Russia will use during the ongoing war against Ukraine. Since 2014, the issue of the NPT efficacy and integrity has become much more complicated and even dramatic. Russian military aggression against Ukraine provoked dangerous misbalance in the existing international security system, undermined the effectiveness and reliability of weapons of mass destruction non-proliferation regimes. By the occupying the Crimea in a blatant violation of the UN Charter and several international agreements, including the Budapest Memorandum, Russia has demonstrated that the legal obligations of a nuclear power to respect independence and sovereignty of non-nuclear state, as well as to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity, are worth nothing. Today is not only the preamble of the NPT, but all three pillars are brutally violated by the nuclear weapon state. Disarmament has been undermined due to unjustified deployment by Russia of its nuclear strike capabilities. Such names as Kinzhal, Avangard, Sarmat, Poseidon are in the air as Russia is openly threatening the world with the new weaponry. Additionally, on March 10, 2022, Russia put its nuclear weapons on high alert. Non-proliferation became an illusion as Russia de facto expanded the geographic area of its nuclear arm deployment after the occupation of Crimea. Moreover, Moscow has already shelled missiles capable to deliver nuclear warheads over the Ukrainian cities from the territory of Belarus, a non-nuclear weapon state, according to the NPT. For the first time in history, civil nuclear facilities have been turned into military targets. You will have a possibility to see and hear the truth about the occupation of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The NPP, the largest in Europe, has already been under occupation since March 4, 2022, and is still used as a military base by the aggressor. The world witnesses how nuclear terrorism sponsored by the nuclear weapon state is arising. On the night of June 6, 2023, the Russian Federation blew up the dam of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, KHPP. We consider the Russian Federation's detention of the dam of the KHPP as a terrorist act against Ukrainian critical infrastructure, which aims to cause as many civilian casualties and destruction as possible. Due to the decrease in the war level in the Kakhovka reservoir, there is also a danger of an incident at already mentioned the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We expect an uncompromised, robust stance of international community in ensuring political, economical, and legal consequences for the terrorist state for all committed crimes. Russia must be ousted from the international nuclear energy market. We welcome the readiness stated by G7 leaders to further reduce dependence on civilian nuclear and related goods from Russia, including by working to assist countries seeking to diversify their supplies. Sanctions on Rosatom, first personal ones and later Russian nuclear fuel and technologies, must be imposed. Robust joint actions are needed to prevent nuclear disaster on global scale. We ask to close the sky over the nuclear power plants in Ukraine, to provide air defense systems. Considering that we live in the world as it is, where over 95% of the UN membership does not possess nuclear weapons, providing non-nuclear state with effective negative security guarantees should be considered as a top priority. We firmly believe that the establishment of new nuclear weapon-free zones, including the one in our region, as well as further strengthening of the International Atomic Energy Agency's system of safeguards, are becoming more urgent tasks for non-proliferation regime. As the ambassador of Ukraine, I am confident that every state will benefit from a transformation of the comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty into a forceful international legal instrument. The other long overdue task on our agenda is the immediate commencement of negotiations on the fissile material cutoff treaty, which is essential both to constrain nuclear proliferation and to advance the goal of nuclear disarmament. It's high time to make the right choice and do our best to restore the NPT, integrity, and save millions of lives. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, dear Ambassador. It's always good to hear from you, and your country and nation have been an inspiration and continue to be to all of us, and as you know, you have our full support. As Rinor mentioned in the opening speech, there's a job to do for cities as well when it comes to nuclear disarmament, and Mayors for Peace is one of these initiatives that could be embraced by the city of Tirana as well. But before I give the floor to the Deputy Mayor, Mrs. Keti Luarasi, I'd like to say a few words about her professional life. She was born in Tirana and holds the position of Deputy Mayor since October of 2021. She joined the municipality of Tirana in 2015 after the first mandate of Mayor Veliai, and she was then the Strategic Planning and HR General Director. In 2019, during the second mandate of Mayor Veliaj, she was promoted to the position of Chief of Staff at the Mayor's Cabinet, where she pursued the implementation of projects and tasks with each department by creating and maintaining cross-departmental relationships, ensuring success. Ms. Luarasi is highly motivated and experienced and has brought to the mayoral team her expert proficiency in designing and managing all operating aspects of people management. Her know-how for startups and organizations, including strategic planning, organizing, standard operating procedures, staffing, leadership, and monitoring and evaluating activities in dynamic and fast-paced environments, both in private and civil society sectors, lay at the core of her work at the municipality of Tirana.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this conference. And I'd like to thank very much Rinor for bringing to the mayor the letters from the esteemed mayors from Japan, and at the same time for sending us the invitation to participate in the Mayors for Peace. It's great to be here, and I would say that participating in such kind of networks always brings value to the cities, because the cities are the grassroots where everything starts, where everything is developed, where not just the work itself is done from the scratch, from the beginning, but from the beginning start the education of the population. And it is in our core, in our values, in our vision, that we need to invest in our people, especially into our young generation, the idea of peace, the idea of building that kind of harmonious and coexisting together. And this is why we have organized so many activities in discussing and debating and so many forums with our young people, that we need to invest in the education of young generation. We need to discuss peace. And cities are just like those melting pots where culture, education, debate and discussions are organized since the grassroots level. But it's not just the peace building, it's also the idea of how we can influence our governments to stop the weapons construction, how we can influence all our international organizations to stop the nuclear disarmament. So there are so many things that we can do in the city, and the cities has the main role in not just discussing and educating, but also changing the mentality of people, relieving them from that kind of fear that exists in order to build nuclear weapons to protect ourselves. If you, Rinor, mentioned very wisely in your speech how many millions of dollars have been spent in one day, in half an hour, to construct these nuclear weapons. Imagine all this money to be put in building our cities. So that would be exactly a total life change and a mindset change for every one of us. Yesterday, we were celebrating together with the ambassador and the Ukrainian embassy their 32nd Independence Day. And it was kind of a frightful celebration. It was not exactly a celebration that everyone needs to have for their Independence Day. It was a celebration with sorrow videos and declarations, frightful declarations for the life of their citizens. And we absolutely stand by Ukraine, and as a city of Tirana, we would stand by with every single city that would work on giving a stop to the nuclear weapons. Without any further ado, I'd like to tell everyone that at the city of Tirana we are very open to organize and to welcome any kind of networks, because during these kind of networks, like the Mayors for Peace, we can have the possibility to exchange our ideas. We have the possibility to share knowledge and to give to each one of us that kind of idea, how we can improve the lives in our city, how we can improve the green cities, how we can work for sustainable cities. Yesterday in The Economist, I was reading about how China has banned all the seafood from Japan, because Japan officially send the waters of the radioactive plants of Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean. The idea is that these kind of activities, these kind of industries destroy our planet, destroy our environment, and these will take at least 10 decades to clean the water. And it will at least take more than 100 of decades to re-establish the economy itself. We have to understand that China is the biggest importance for the Japan seafood. So what exactly as cities we have to do is we need to take into consideration how we can improve the mentality of our people, the mentality of all of us, the politicians itself, how we can improve and bring that peace of mind to our citizens. So thank you very much, and we wish all of you good luck in this fantastic invader, and let's work all together to bring peace in all the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Next up in line to speak, we have the Secretary General of the Red Cross Association of Albania, Mr. Artur Katuci. Artur has been working with the International Federation for the Red Cross and the Red Crescent in Tirana since 1992. He began working with the Albanian Red Cross as a first aid program coordinator and then as a field officer during the Kosovo crisis in 1998 and 1999. In 2014, he was appointed as the Secretary General of the Albanian Red Cross and has held that position until now. Sir, the floor is yours.
Shumë faleminderit Blendi, nëse më lejonin do flas shqip. Do kisha dashur që të kishte pak më shumë audiencë, edhe t'ju drejtoheshim për shembull diplomatëve të rinj ose ushtarakëve të rinj ose juristëve të rinj me të cilët mund bëj debati. Unë e di që është debat ballkanik, po mirë është që Shqipja dhe shqiptarët ta trajtonin pak si debat. Video që pam në hapjes këtij paneli është një video e Komitetit Ndërkombëtar të Kryqit Kuq. Është komponenti i lëvizjes ndërkombëtare të Kryqit Kuq, i cili merret me viktimat e luftës dhe me atë që njihet si ligji ndërkombëtar humanitar, ligji i luftës, i cili thotë që lufta ka rregulla dhe rregullat e luftës nuk janë opsionale, nuk janë një gjë që zgjidhen apo nuk zgjidhen me dëshirë, por është një gjë që nëse nuk zbatohen, ato çojnë në gjykatën ndërkombëtare për dënimin e krimeve të luftës. Në këto lloj aspekti, debati për armët bërthamore është një debat me disa dimensione dhe shumë e vështirë që ne në panel të trajtojmë edhe të marrim përsipër që t'japim rekomandime apo sugjerime. Është një debat në fushën ligjore, është një debat në fushën morale, është një debat në fushën humanitare. Dhe videoja që u shfaq pak më përpara mund të ishte me hyrjen nëse a ka mundësi që ne të ndihmojmë, të japim asistencë, të japim mbështetje nëse ndodh një sulm bërthamor, a mundet? Domethënë organizatat e Kryqit Kuq janë organizata që japin ndihmë në rast konfliktesh apo situatash të jashtëzakonshme. A japin organizatat e Kryqit Kuq, por shtetet, qeverit, a japin asistencë nëse ndodh një sulm bërthamor? Mund të shtroj si pyetje, dhe çfarë asistence japim? Hajde të përgatitemi në rast se ndodh një sulm bërthamor. A përgatitemi dot? Përgjigjja është zero asistent, zero përgatitje. Nëse ndodh një sulm bërthamor, ne thjesht pësojmë pasojat e një veprimtarie shkatrimtare. Sulmi ka disa koincidenca ky muaj në cilin po mbajmë këtë konferencë. Koincidencat janë të mira, janë edhe të këqija. Janë të mira sepse në gusht kemi përvjetorin e Hiroshima Nagasakit, kemi përvjetorin e konventave të Gjenevës, ligjin e luftës që thamë përpara. Mirë po, janë edhe, nuk është edhe koincidencë e mirë, se është kohë pushimesh. Domethënë, njerëzit që kanë fuqi dhe pushtet janë në pushime. Domethënë, tjetër lloj paneli ishte parashikuar që të ishte sot këtu, tjetër panel kemi. Domethënë, ne njerëz të mirë jemi, po ne nuk kemi fuqi që të vendosim, edhe që të marrim vendime, edhe që Shqipërinë ta fusim në listën atyre vendeve që deri tani e kanë nënshkruar traktatin për ndalimin e armëve bërthamore. Kemi qenë në një panel tjetër me gazetaren tim preferuar Blendi Sala në vitin 2021-2020, nëse mos e gaboj, sapo kishte hyrë në fuqi traktati për ndalimin e armëve bërthamore dhe ishte një konferencë për sigurinë dhe paqen, Rinor gjithashtu ka qenë dhe u fol aty dhe për armët bërthamore. Që atëherë deri tani me futjen në fuqi të këtij traktati, sepse ishin bërë 50 shtete që e kishin ratifikuar. Aktualisht janë, nëse s'gaboj, 68 shtete që e kanë ratifikuar. Shqipëria akoma nuk e ka ratifikuar. Janë 95 shtete që e kanë nënshkruar. Shqipëria akoma nuk e ka nënshkruar. Domethënë, përpjekjet duhet të jenë të tilla që duke sensibilizuar opinionin, trysnia të jetë mbi parlamentin shqiptar. Ky vend është i përkryer, i shkëlqyer për të bërë takime të kësaj fushe. Domethënë, jemi fut këtu në një tunel bërthamor. Po jemi fut vetëm ne 4 panelistët, duhet të futen masa që të marri vlerë ky tunel bërthamor që nuk e dim se sa mbron nëse larg qoftë ka një sulm bërthamor. Çështja tjetër, e dyta dhe e fundit dhe pastaj vetëm një përmbledhje të vogël, lidhet që ne nuk u përgatit kemi dot nëse ndodh një sulm bërthamor për asistencë, për të ndihmuar njerëzit që janë nevojë. Atëherë, a mund të jemi përpara dilemës nëse pyesim dikën nëse ndodh një sulm bërthamor? Çfarë zgjedhim? Çfarë urojmë për veten tonë? Të jetojmë apo të vdesim? Na marri bomba me vete apo të vujmë pasojat e bombës dhe ta shohim me sytë tanë se do të thotë sulm bërthamor? Të shohim gjithë ato që dha videoja pak më parë me atë zotrin, derisa moshën ku diun 75 vjeçare apo 8 vjeçare bën akoma check-up për të parë dhe ai futi në anën e njeriu që kishte pas fat nga sulmi bërthamor. Unë vetë do zgjidhja mos jetoj. Sepse problematika që lidhet me Shqipërinë është e tillë që duke dalë nga një sistem i tmerrshëm totalitar. Dhe këto lloj pamjesh, edhe ky muze masi e vizitojmë, na sjell atë atmosferën aq sinistr të asaj periudhe. Por ne mendonim mbasi ndodhen ndryshimet që e ardhmja e fëmijëve tanë, e ardhmja e brezitri, e këtij brezitri pra i viteve 90, pastaj brezitri viteve 2000, pastaj brezitri viteve 2010, pastaj brezitri viteve 2020 dhe pastaj brezitri viteve 2030, nëse ndërtojmë një realitet tjetër, zonja nënkryetare e bashkisë foli për gjithë përpjekjet që bën bashkia dhe për gjithë ndryshimet që ka pasur qyteti i Tiranës, dhe nëse zerrohen me një sulm bërthamor, çfarë zgjedhim? Të jetojmë kësaj, apo të vdesim, dilemë shumë e vështirë, po sepse ne jetojmë me njerëz të dashur, ne jetojmë me njerëz që janë familjarët tanë, që janë të afërmit tanë, që janë miqtë tanë, dhe asnjë njeri nuk do donte që ta shifte këtë. Dhe ky lloj presione dhe ky lloj ndjeshmërie për pasojat që ka sulmi bërthamor dhe armët bërthamore e vendosen në rend të ditës, sidomos në këtë periudhë, sidomos me luftën që erdhi në Evropë nëpërmjet Rusisë në Ukrainë, sidomos me shumë luftra, janë mbi 100 konflikte ndërkombëtare që zhvillohen aktualisht në botë, të cilat e kanë sjellë gjithnjë më tepër realitetin dhe frikën dhe ankthin se mund të ketë një sulm bërthamor. Se kërcënimi për përdorimin e armëve bërthamore po bëhet gjithnjë më tepër një hipotezë. Dhe e kemi thënë dhe atëherë dhe le ta them edhe sot duke shpresuar që ka shqiptarë që ndjekin këtë transmetim, që në një sondazh që është zhvilluar në 16 vende, 16 shtete, nga të cilat 8 ishin vende në luftë dhe 8 nuk ishin vende të luftë, me 16.000 të rinj të moshës, tani nuk i kam po deri në 30 vjeç, me pyetjen se sa ata e shifnin mundësinë e përdorimit të një arme bërthamore, këto përgjigjen kam dëshirë ta jap të saktë, 54% mendojnë se ka ardhur koha që arma bërthamore do përdoret në 10 vitet e ardhshme. Dhe ky studim është i vitit 2020. Kemi edhe 7 vjet kohë që ta shohim do realizohet apo do realizohet kjo frikë. E para dhe e dyta, në këtë përqindje për 16.000 të rinj në këto shtete, pra 8 në luftë dhe 8 jo në luftë, pyetjes nëse ka ardhur koha që bota prapë do t'i futet një lufte të tretë botërore, i përgjigjen për fat keq me shifrën për 47%. Më thënë, kjo tregon që organizatat shoqërisë civile, si organizata që përfaqëson Rinori, dhe të gjithë organizatat e tjera që përgatiten për rastet për ato situatat e qametit, për situatat e konflikteve apo të fatkeqësive jashtëzakonisht mëdha, duhet bëjnë përpjekje shumë herë më të mëdha për të koordinuar dhe për të arritur presionin me qëllim që nga këto 68 vende që e kanë ratifikuar traktatin për ndalimin e armëve bërthamore, të bëhen gjithë vendet që janë aktualisht antarë të OKB-s. Dhe për ta mbyllë, du të them një gjë të fundit, që edhe vetë ratifikimin vetvete nuk e largon frikën dhe është e tmerrshme, po ta mendojmë që janë vetëm 9 shtete që e kanë armën bërthamore dhe 189 të tjera që vujnë frikën dhe anktin e një sulmi bërthamor dhe të një shkatrimit planetit. Dhe në këtë lloj kuadri, edhe nëse ratifikohet nga 196 shtetet anëtare të OKB-s, do jetë shumë i vështirë zbatimi për këto 9 shtete, çfarë do ndodhi me armët bërthamore, si do shkatrohen, kush do ta marrë iniciativën që do shkatrohet. Por të paktën ata shtete që nuk e kanë armën bërthamore, pra 196 minus 9, se s'bën do të arrisin presionin dhe duhet ta ratifikojnë këtë marrëveshje me qëllim që kjo ëndër dhe ky makt të largohet përfundimisht nga planeti ynë. Ju faleminderit.
Shumë faleminderit, Artur. I was jokingly in our conversation with Rinor preparing for this, told him that I've seen Oppenheimer on its opening night, and I was better prepared for the conference because of it. And I believe in a way I am. Because just to think of what a chain reaction of nuclear weapon bombardment would cause would be the end of civilization, not only life on the planet, all the species, but all of history and poetry and theater and everything beautiful that has been built on this planet. And it just seems so arrogant and unfair and, to just be able to destroy all of this creation with pushing buttons. And it's just something that requires, as all of our speakers have said so far, a lot of action and a lot of pressure from everybody that sets foot on this planet. Our next speaker is sitting in Vienna this afternoon. His name is Rene Holbach, and he is the Political Affairs Officer at the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs. Rene Holbach is a Political Affairs Officer in the Science and Technology and International Security Unit of the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs, UNODA. He previously worked on nuclear issues in UNODA's Weapons of Mass Destruction branch. Before joining the UNODA, Mr. Holbach worked in the Secretariat of the General Assembly. Previous to that, he worked with issues related to the international criminal justice and United Nations reform and the permanent mission of Liechtenstein to the United Nations, as well as the International Criminal Court. Mr. Holbach holds a Master of Philosophy in International Relations from Cambridge University and a Bachelor of Arts in Modern History and Politics from the Royal Holloway University of London. Mr. Holbach, I'm giving the line to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs to take part in this forum. It's a great honor for me personally to speak on such a distinguished panel. Unfortunately, the topic of today's discussion is extremely timely. There has not been a time since the depths of the Cold War that the risk of nuclear weapons being used has been so high, at the same time as the regime intended to prevent such use is so fragile. For reasons nobody would have wished for, nuclear disarmament has returned to public discourse everywhere. For the United Nations, it is clear that the only way to completely eliminate nuclear risks is to completely eliminate nuclear weapons. This is an approach that goes back to the very beginning of the organization. In its first resolution, adopted less than 6 months after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the General Assembly created a commission charged with making proposals inter alia for the elimination from national armaments of atomic weapons and all other major weapons adaptable to mass destruction. Since then, nuclear disarmament has remained the highest disarmament priority of the United Nations. In his policy brief on a new agenda for peace released last month, Secretary General Antonio Guterres reflects on these challenges. The very first action he proposes is the elimination of nuclear weapons. To that end, he makes a number of specific recommendations, including an urgent recommitment to the pursuit of a world free of nuclear weapons and to reversing the erosion of international norms against the spread and use of such weapons, and pending the total elimination of nuclear weapons, for states possessing nuclear weapons, a commitment never to use them, and finally, the negotiation by the states with the largest nuclear arsenals of further limits and reductions on nuclear weapons. At the Office for Disarmament Affairs, we support the efforts of the Secretary General and of member states in advancing nuclear disarmament priorities. To that end, we provide support, for example, to expert groups, which in recent years have considered important elements necessary for a world without nuclear weapons, such as nuclear disarmament verification and a fissile material cutoff treaty. We also support the negotiation of new treaties in this field, most recently the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, as well as the periodic meetings of states parties to relevant treaties, such as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or the NPT. I should also say that in our work, we cooperate closely with civil society, including by taking part in forums such as this. In the nuclear field, this also involves working with organizations representing the survivors of the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Hibakusha, to preserve their stories and to share them with new generations. And of course, we also work very closely with ICANN, whose special role in the TPNW has been recognized by the treaty states parties. But let me just say a few words about the NPT. You may have heard of the first session of the preparatory committee for the next NPT review conference, which took place just a couple of weeks ago in Vienna. The NPT is a particularly important instrument and is regarded as the cornerstone of the global disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. For its non-nuclear weapon states parties, it contains the legal obligations verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency not to acquire nuclear weapons. The 5 nuclear weapon states recognized by the treaty, China, France, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States, in turn commit not to transfer nuclear weapons to any non-nuclear weapon state. Crucially, the treaty also contains a legally binding commitment to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to the cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date and to nuclear disarmament. This represents the nuclear weapon states' only legally binding commitment to nuclear disarmament. Since the indefinite extension to the treaty in 1995, the quinquennial review conferences of parties to the treaty have become de facto nuclear disarmament negotiation forums, at which important agreements have been achieved. Worryingly, however, the past 2 review conferences have failed to agree on outcome documents. I've also been asked to address the preparations for the second meeting of states parties to the TPNW. So following the entry into force of the TPNW in 2021, the Office for Disarmament Affairs has supported the efforts of states parties to implement the treaty. At their first meeting in 2022, states parties adopted a declaration entitled Our Commitment to a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, as well as an action plan and an intersessional program of work. In the lead up to the second meeting of states parties, the intersessional program is considering matters including nuclear disarmament measures as contained in Article 4 of the treaty, victim assistance and environmental remediation, as well as other matters like gender. The second meeting of states parties, which will take place from 27 November to 1 December 2023 at United Nations headquarters in New York, will present an opportunity for states parties to take stock of the progress achieved so far and to make further such progress. All states that are not party to the treaty have a right to attend this meeting as observers. At the first meeting, 34 states, including several European states such as Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, availed themselves of this right. Attendance as an observer state allows non-states parties to engage constructively with the TPNW states parties, to share views and concerns regarding the treaty, and to consider areas where common efforts might be possible. The procedure to attend as an observer is very simple. Interested states need only to send a note verbal or official letter to the Office for Disarmament Affairs. I should note, however, that pursuant to the terms of the treaty, all observer states pay a share of the costs of the meeting. Recent geopolitical developments have again brought the urgency of the total elimination of nuclear weapons to the forefront of public consciousness. The Office of Disarmament Affairs will continue to work towards this end in cooperation with all interested parties. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holbach. Next speaker is Mr. Daniel Hogsta, who is the Interim Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, otherwise known shortly as ICAN. From February 2023, Daniel is holding this position after the departure of Beatrice Finn, until there is a new executive director at the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Previously, Daniel was a campaign coordinator of ICAN, responsible for the ICAN Cities Appeal, the ICAN Parliamentary Pledge, as well as supporting the campaign activities and political engagements of ICAN's partner organizations. In the period which culminated in the negotiations of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, Daniel coordinated advocacy efforts for ICAN and was responsible for generating awareness, understanding, and support among governments at the humanitarian initiative and for the concept of a new treaty to ban nuclear weapons. During the negotiations of the TPNW in New York in 2017, he helped to lead ICAN's lobbying team to ensure the treaty reflected ICAN's core principles. Since 2018, Daniel's work focused on supporting the work of ICAN partners to garner political support for the treaty in nuclear umbrella state contexts, as well as on broadening the community of stakeholders that champion the TPNW. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me well. And if you can't, please just wave frantically, and we'll figure it out. Thank you. So thank you very much to Pathways for Peace and to Rinor in particular for inviting me and for holding this really important and exciting event. At the beginning, I just want to say how much I appreciated and take on board Ambassador Volodymyr's words about the unacceptable threat of nuclear weapons that Ukraine is living under right now due to the brutal invasion of Russia. This invasion has created a humanitarian tragedy, of course, and obviously creates the shadow of a nuclear weapons catastrophe. So as the ambassador noted very well, we are in the perverse situation where an NPT, nuclear weapon state, depository state, I would add, has invaded an NPT non-nuclear weapon state under the cover of the threat of use of nuclear weapons. And for us at ICAN, this shows just how unacceptable the status quo is when it comes to nuclear weapons and the misguided logic of nuclear deterrence. So I've been asked to talk a bit about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the TPNW, as we call it, and its relationship with NATO membership. Of course, relevant to Albania, as well as the importance of the ICAN Cities Appeal, which has been noted earlier, the imperative need for increased leadership in nuclear disarmament, and of course our hopes for the second meeting of states parties to the TPNW, which Rene spoke about very well just before me. So much has been made since the treaty was adopted in 2017, and probably even before, much has been made about the relationship about such a treaty, or perhaps the alleged tension that possibly exists between NATO membership and the possibility of joining the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I would note that the fundamental objective is shared by the TPNW and NATO, which is, of course, the eradication of nuclear weapons threats. through the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. This is something that NATO has said many times, including in its strategic doctrine. However, of course, the divergence lies in the strategy employed to achieve this shared goal. In terms of what the TPNW would require of a NATO member, it's quite simple, which is in order to comply with the prohibitions under a treaty, the states party must renounce any role for nuclear weapons in its national security policy. For some NATO states, of course, the ones who possess nuclear weapons, the situation would require disarmament, of course. For the few NATO non-nuclear weapon states who host nuclear weapons, it would require the end of those nuclear sharing agreements. And of course, for the majority of NATO states, it would mean dissociating itself with NATO's nuclear mission, for which there is historical precedent, even if at the current moment, all NATO member states subscribe to NATO's nuclear mission. So while certain NATO members express strong reservations about the prohibition of nuclear weapons and of course emphasize the importance of maintaining NATO's nuclear sharing agreements and NATO's nuclear weapons doctrine, as expressed through its strategic concept, it is essential to avoid enforcing a blanket restriction on engagement with the TPNW. Such an approach must respect the readiness of alliance members to explore the treaty's potential contribution to NATO's disarmament goals, while also ensuring that alliance obligations are met. And I think it's important, and what we try to note in our reports as well, is that throughout NATO's history, members have embraced varying stances on weapons and strategies, which acknowledges the sovereignty of each democratic state that makes up NATO. So the diversity of policies, even concerning involvement with NATO's nuclear weapons, has not caused insurmountable operational challenges. Even today, there are some states that have different policies when it concerns the stationing of nuclear weapons on their countries in peacetime, and also some restrictions in wartime as well. And this is considered to be acceptable. In the past, there were states, including Denmark, who specifically dissociated themselves from NATO's nuclear mission in the 1980s as well. So there is precedent for different positions when it comes to nuclear weapons, as there are on other issues in the NATO alliance. And since there is no legal incompatibility between NATO and the TPNW, it's not surprising that certain NATO and other umbrella states who adopt similar military agreements with nuclear weapon states as NATO states, that there are certain states that are compelled to take a closer look at the TPNW. We have certain states that observe the first meeting of states parties, willing to acknowledge the goals of the treaty and to participate in discussions and make their views known, whether they be positive or concerns about the treaty. And that's considered to be fine, as well it should be. So even the governments that are opposed to the treaty are not anymore acknowledging that the treaty can be wished away or ignored, which I think is a very positive development as well. And we saw at the NPT preparatory committee, the conference that just took place that Rene referred to, that even the comments, while there were very strident arguments against the TPNW from certain nuclear weapon states, there's not at all this pretense of some kind of incompatibility between the TPNW and the NPT that we heard from NATO states in the past. And I think that it's a very positive development to kind of reduce the sense of polarization on the issue. I wanted to move to talk about the ICANN Cities Appeal, which has been mentioned as well, which is a commitment by a city or a town, and there's over 500 cities and towns globally that have done so, to commit to the objectives of the TPNW and to then call on their governments to join it as well. So the range of cities that have supported the appeal range inside from huge metropolitan areas and capitals to small cities as well. I mean, these include cities like Washington, D.C., Paris, Berlin, Canberra, Munich, Geneva, my city where I'm speaking from at the moment. They've endorsed the treaty and they've called on their respective governments to join its cause. And far from being a symbolic move, it's a powerful means to engage with local leaders who recognize that cities are primary targets of nuclear weapons. And in a way, it also serves as a spark for local politics to to take up the issue of nuclear disarmament and not just leave it to the national political sphere where it usually rests as well. And as the deputy mayor of Tirana, Luarasi, said very well, the potential that cities have to change the mindset of people when it comes to peace and nuclear disarmament is really what is the central motivating factor when it comes to the ICANN city's appeal. So of course, I would just like to echo what Rinor said, that it would be very inspiring to see Tirana lead the way in Albania by joining this coalition of cities, and as well as setting an example for the region and beyond. Similar to the ICANN Cities Appeal, there is also what's known as the ICANN Parliamentary Pledge, which has garnered the commitment of over 1,400 sitting members of parliament worldwide. Their dedication to advocating for their government's participation in the treaty is translating into concrete actions, including motions, debates, and increased pressure on their executive branches in those countries as well. We've seen at the first meeting of states parties that the attendance by some of the observing states, including Belgium and the Netherlands, was directly motivated by members of parliament who had raised a motion urging the government to attend, which achieved majority support and was decisive in getting the governments to observe the treaty as well. So I think it's on the parliamentary front, on the local government front, it's extremely important, and we're extremely excited to see the momentum that is developing there. Because the reality today is that the nuclear armed states are taking steps towards a very concerning arms race, and all intentions are that they intend to keep their nuclear weapons and modernize them for maintenance into the indefinite future. And of course, this juncture is particularly pivotal with Russia's recent and extremely dangerous threats to use nuclear weapons. It's pivotal that leaders uphold democratic values, human rights, humanitarianism, and international law. The TPNW progresses. It moves forward regardless of the stance of the nuclear armed states. And as international norms shift and national laws align against nuclear weapons, the treaty remains a cornerstone of hope. So the decision before us, the decision before Albania and other countries in the region, is not only strategic, but also historic. So while Albania's security paradigm may not undergo a monumental transformation by joining the TPNW, it does nevertheless represent a significant historical step. It reflects a rejection of nuclear weapons and the inherent hypocrisy in certain security arrangements. And by embracing the treaty, Albania can be among the leading states, creating a future built on shared security and devoid of the most destructive weapons known to humanity as well. And I was struck, and I would like to emphasize as well what Secretary General Artur Katuci of the Albanian Red Cross said with respect to the anxiety that young people feel with respect to the threat of nuclear weapons. And one can only imagine. I do commend the Red Cross Red Crescent movement for commissioning the study and the polling of young people in relation to concerns around nuclear weapons. I think that was a very historic moment and really shows the concern that the young people feel for the future. So in that light, we hope that the TPNW can also be kind of a beacon of hope. That nuclear disarmament is indeed possible. So finally, just to mention, and not to cover some of the same ground as Rene just did, but of course later this year there will be the second meeting of states parties to the TPNW, and we think that, especially in this time, its significance cannot be understated. And I do want to acknowledge the indispensable role that UN ODA plays in supporting the treaty and its meetings. Last year, at the first meeting of states parties, they adopted the historic Vienna Action Plan, which contained 50 concrete and progressive actions to implement the treaty and work towards a world free of nuclear weapons. So far from being a symbolic exercise, the states parties of the treaty are very serious about taking forward actions related to nuclear disarmament verification, victim assistance, environmental remediation, and international cooperation and assistance, and of course universalization of the treaty. Each member state of the treaty is expected in and itself to become an advocate and a leader on nuclear disarmament by supporting the treaty. And as Rene touched on as well, and I won't go into too much detail, but of course it's relevant for a state like Albania at this time, which is of course the possibility to participate as an observer, which is something that we're calling on all NATO states to do. This is a path to offer a constructive avenue for engagement with the treaty, which enables the sharing of views, expertise, and contribution to discussions on implementing the treaty's provision. And also, I think it demonstrates commitment to the disarmament cause and promotes trust and cooperation and aligns with the UN's efforts to advance disarmament and to reduce nuclear risks. So finally, I just say that the call for Balkan leadership on this resonates with the region's unique historical perspective when it comes to disarmament issues in particular. We recall the leadership that some of these states have shown on the treaties that led to the bans on landmines and cluster munitions as well. So the second meeting of states parties to the TPNW highlights the collaborative spirit of the nations striving for a safer world. And as we navigate these complex dynamics that we certainly have before us, let us recognize that our actions today shape the contours of a more secure future. So thank you very much for listening and for your time, and best of luck.
Thank you, Mr. Hogsta. Let me now introduce Dr. Maria Sotiropoulou, who is the president of the Greek Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Dr. Maria is a medical doctor and author of 14 books since 1992. She's been the president of the Greek affiliate of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, which is an organization that was the winner of the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize. She's a member of the International and European Board of the organization and has traveled on peacekeeping missions to Turkey, ex-Yugoslavia, and Iraq. Dr. Sotiropoulou has also been appointed as an advisor to the Marangopoulos Human Rights Foundation. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. That was a hope in this gloomy period we experienced, because it is a hope to create a new alliance at the nuclear in the Balkan area. Let me show you some okay. Slideshow. Is it okay for you? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. You can see. You can share my screen now. Okay. So IPPNW was created, it's a medical association who is created to the Hippocratic quote that says it's better to prevent than to cure. And it was during the Cold War that two cardiologists, one from the Soviet Union and one from the United States, decided to tell to everybody how near to the totally catastrophe the world has been. So IPPNW in 1985 get the Peace Nobel Prize. IPPNW educates health professionals, political leaders, and the public about the medical and environmental consequences of nuclear warfare. And in the United Nations, IPPNW documented the health and environmental effects of the production, testing, and use of nuclear weapons in order to create all the anti-nuclear treaties. Unfortunately, as you understand from the previous presentations, we saw that the NPT, for instance, treaty is not working so well, since we saw that it was used for the invasions of United States to the Iraq War. So IPPNW and its affiliates also organized citizens and the nuclear states to protect change their government's policies. But as the year passed, we understood that it was not only a medical duty to prevent nuclear war, but we should also involve many other people. So here you can see this is the birth certificate of ICANN. This is the decision we made to create ICANN. You heard from Daniel how hard works ICANN, and that received, as we all know, the Nobel Prize of 2000, the Nobel Prize. And in the same year, we managed to pass the new treaty in the United Nations, and now we hope that we could create a very good legal instrument to abolish all nuclear weapons from our country, from all the world. In Greece, in the beginning, because I was the president of the Greek affiliate of IPPNW, I was automatically made the representative, the first representative of ICANN in Greece. But now we have three organizations who are ICANN partners in Greece. The one is World Without Violence and Wars. The other is Nature Friends in Greece, and the other is the Greek affiliate of IPPNW. And we have several activities like information to the people, meeting with politicians in all political parties. The interesting thing about Greece is that because we made several visits in our parliament, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we went even to the president of the Greek Republic occasionally, because when peace boat come twice in Greece, we made with Hibakusha several actions. Among them is to visit the politicians in our country. And as ICANN partners, before the last election, we had visited all the political parties, asking them to say what if they want to sign the new anti-nuclear treaty. Of course, we also have launched the Save the City ICANN campaign, which you heard from Daniel about this. And now we are very happy because 66 municipalities voted. And I mean that we don't have only, the declaration from the mayor that they support us, but we ask from the council of every municipality to vote supporting the treaty. That gives us the population of more than 3 million people. Greece has less than 10 million people, and more than 3 millions support already NPT treaty, and I think it is important. Because Greece and Albania are NATO countries, as you heard before, we should say that NATO are not it is not could easily be members of the new treaty. They should not say that we are already NPT members. They should be also members of the new treaty. And we should also say that Greece, it is interesting that among the 6 NATO countries that facilitate, have in their region nuclear weapons, Greece is the only one that has not now, because in the 1990s we got free of the previous American nuclear weapons we use to facilitate in our territory. And we hope that the new problems will not make our government to obey NATO and bring again nuclear weapons in our country. In order to support that, we should be optimistic about the development, about what we do as a public, in the nuclear movement. We should remind that NPT was voted in the United Nations in 1968, but it's starting to be active in 1995. So a new agreement like the one we facilitate, we push to work in our government, we should continue to push it in order to be active in a few years. And we should be, we as Balkan NGOs, we should be very, very optimistic because we have already made a lot of progress. For instance, I want to remind that me as IPPNW representative have visited Tirana in 1993 and created in that time the first Albanian IPPNW affiliate. First president was Professor Popa in that time. Unfortunately, they were not interested to continue our collaboration. But we have, in the Balkans, we have strong collaboration that is created not so much about with the anti-nuclear treaty, but for many years because of the anti-nuclear plants in our regions and because of the use of depleted uranium in the war in Yugoslavia. I want to remind you that there was a lot of pressure from all Balkan countries against when there was in 1994 the danger from the nuclear plant in Kozloduy, Bulgaria. On the other hand, with the Turkish affiliation of IPPNW, we were in 1994 with Süleyman Demirel, who was then president of the Turkish democracy, and we discussed not only the nuclear war, the war against nuclear war, but also the creation of the Akutu factory. And we should remind that because of a very strong alliance against this factory and many Mediterranean and Balkan efforts, we then tried to stop the Akutu project. Unfortunately, you know now that Akutu is now a working land in our region. And as you heard from the ambassador in Ukraine, the war there made us understand that a nuclear plant is potentially a nuclear weapon. Nuclear, not in the classical way, but every nuclear plant could be a weapon, could be weaponized. Of course, we should be also very optimistic because we managed this is a European meeting in Bulgaria, and we managed to stop the Belene factory that was wanted to be created in Bulgaria. And also with IPPNW, we have some conferences in Serbia, and the last very interesting, I believe, for you thing is that in Izmir, Turkey, last year, it was held a very important symposium in which two mayors from Greece, who have already signed the Save the City campaign, our Save the City campaign, met the Smyrna mayor and asked him also to collaborate. And I think this is very strong message about how the public, how we, the people, can be effective in the international move, in every historical decision. And I would like also to end saying that the new treaty, ICANN should be proud very, very much because it is a victory of the civil society. Thank you very much. I hope it was not so complicated with the PowerPoint presentation. I would like to thank you, and I am expecting better collaboration among all Balkans NGOs, anti-nuclear NGOs, and peace movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Next up, we have another doctor. It's either too early or too late in Auckland, New Zealand right now. We're going to meet Dr. Carly Burch. I'm going to say a few words about her before I give her the floor. Since January of 2023, Dr. Burch has been a lecturer at the Waipapa Taumata Rao University in Auckland, New Zealand. She specializes in feminist and anti-colonial science and technology studies, ethnographic methods and collaborative research strategies, and her research agenda addresses questions of social and environmental justice related to health, food, and technology in both disaster and design. She was born and raised in Hawaii, and in the island of Maui she was raised, the beautiful lands of Kanaka Maoli, who she supports in their movement to regain sovereignty over the native homelands. During her graduate and PhD studies, Dr. Burch explored consumer perceptions and actions related to food safety after the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. Dr. Burch.
Great. Thank you all. Can you hear me speaking?
Yes.
I hope. Okay, thank you. So, yes, it is a bit late on a Friday evening here, but I am so honored to be a part of this prestigious panel. Thank you to Rinor and the Pathways for Peace for inviting me here. I was actually up early this morning because we were having some protest against the wastewater discharge at Tokyo Electric Power Company's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. So I've been really excited to hear others starting to connect the dots between, nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. It's really important that we talk about these things together, and that's what I'm going to be presenting on here. So I'll be talking a little bit about anti-imperial and anti-colonial nuclear futures. And I'm working with colleagues Emily Simmons, Sonia Mueller, and Sophie Baggett-Jewett, and we've been working on this mapping project that was funded by ICANN, and we are so grateful for that. The pictures on here are from my research looking at the aftermath of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster, and the other picture is from my colleague Emily Simmons, and she works with indigenous communities who live near uranium mines in Canada. And so we came together from our different locations around the world, our different type of nuclear issues, and we found a lot of similarities in what we were noticing when we were doing our research. And these discussions amongst us is where this research emerged. So yes, we were funded through a critical nuclear weapons scholarship by ICANN in the inaugural round of that, and I really hope that this will continue into the future because it's been so important. It's really difficult to get funding to do critical nuclear research within nuclear imperial world order, where this kind of research is not usually encouraged. So these are my collaborators, and we took on this big project of trying to map nuclear imperial and nuclear colonial infrastructures. And I met, like I just said, Emily Simmons. She's done really important work on nuclear waste, and in particular, thinking of uranium as a form of nuclear waste. So what are we mapping? We're mapping nuclear imperialism. It's a, as everyone knows here, a geopolitical power that comes from uranium. And we keep focusing on uranium because that helps to connect us to the land. So we think of geopolitical, we take the original meaning of geo to be land and the earth. And we really try to keep grounded, because a thing with nuclear issues is it's really easy to get ungrounded and get it all to these abstract imaginaries, such as the imaginary excision between peaceful nuclear energy and violent nuclear energy. And what we're trying to do is to show the shared infrastructures. And another thing when we start to notice that is how nuclear imperialism is sustained by nuclear colonialism. So nuclear colonialism is a very key strategy to sustaining nuclear imperialism. And we borrow this definition from Danielle Enders, who describes nuclear colonialism as a system of domination through which governments and corporations target indigenous peoples and their lands to maintain the nuclear production process. And again, when scholars are talking about the nuclear production process, they're often talking about, both nuclear energy and nuclear weapons technologies. And that's a really important thing about nuclear colonialism, is it keeps those connected. And what we're doing is we're really thinking about the role of this nuclear colonialism in maintaining and sustaining nuclear imperialism, and looking at nuclear energy as a strategy of nuclear imperialism, and not going ahead with that that imaginary that has been created. So we're mapping nuclear imperialism. Why are we doing this? We really want to show how assumed unrestricted access to lands and waters, so we can think of those as colonial land relations and nuclear colonialism. Maybe there's not a direct targeting of indigenous people, but the colonial land relations are there. There's this entitlement to land and water to pollute or to, detonate weapons or whatever it is. And how this is key to sustaining nuclear imperial geopolitical order. And we're also creating these maps to support people looking at our maps to imagine futures beyond nuclear imperialism and beyond nuclear colonialism. So these maps are a political tool, and we're hoping that they'll be useful for people in imagining alternative futures, but without, ignoring the material reality that we are in. So we're mapping a number of infrastructures, and we're seeing these as the sites that sustain nuclear imperial power. We have uranium mines, we have nuclear detonations, we have nuclear weapon states, nuclear waste ocean dumping, nuclear reprocessing plants, and nuclear power plants, the commercial ones. And then we also are mapping nuclear interventions. And so we see these as attempts to disrupt nuclear imperial power. And we've categorized them into two categories: treaties that edit and treaties that eliminate. And so the treaties that edit nuclear imperialism, we have the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, we have Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the London Convention, the Treaty of Rarotonga, or the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and the London Protocol. And then the treaties that eliminate, we're focused on Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So I'm going to show you a quick video of the maps. Please know these maps are partial and provisional. We will never be able to map all nuclear infrastructures. So it's always going to be that way, but these are also still in draft form. We're just finalizing them because our map maker finally came back from holiday. The material existence of these infrastructures are incontestable. Something that Emily and I both found in our research was just how much, in my case, in the aftermath of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, there's so much effort that goes into silencing discussions about, nuclear pollution and its consequences. And so we both experienced that kind of gaslighting, that kind of silencing, whether it was in the, near the uranium mines or in the aftermath of a nuclear disaster at a nuclear power plant. And so we wanted to create something that no one can contest that these infrastructures exist or that these treaties exist. However, the infrastructures represent sites of ongoing contestation. So you could go into any of the sites on our map and you would probably find a lot of contestation, but you cannot contest that these things actually exist. So I'm going to play, this is about a minute. (1950). 1960. 1970. 1980. 1990. 2000. 2010. 2020. Okay. So when we are talking about this, I think what we want is for anyone to take these maps and to think with them. But what we've done is we've made 4 different cuts so that we can tell stories about what's happening. And so the first cut we made is at 1950, and we're talking about establishing nuclear imperial infrastructures through sorry, I can't see there. Extraction, experimentation, extermination, engineering, and expulsion. So we're playing with these E's, but the extraction is the mining, experimentation, and extermination are the bomb detonations. Engineering is, the processing and reprocessing of uranium fuels, and then expulsion is the waste dumping. And so originally there was a lot of waste dumped into the ocean, which is coming back now, it appears. We're returning to that. 1962 is our next cut. So we're talking about domesticating nuclear infrastructures through euphemism, excision, and enclosure. So this is when nuclear energy reactors enter the space. We have, euphemisms about peaceful nuclear energy, and then that excision between the peaceful and the violent. And now we have, the sustainable and this unsustainable. And of course, they're both very true. Nuclear weapons are extremely unsustainable, but the fact that we think about them as separate, it averts from the fact that they have a lot of shared infrastructures. And then the enclosure is really looking into how nuclear energy is a strategy of nuclear imperialism, because it was an opportunity for nuclear imperial. For the U.S. was the one who first thought of nuclear energy with the Atoms for Peace program, but it was a way for them to enclose the uranium resources and divert them toward this peaceful nuclear energy and away from, the Soviet Union's weapons program. And so there was a lot of strategy there. 1986 is the next cut, and we're talking about editing nuclear imperialism. So all of these different treaties that are touching on different pieces of this wider nuclear imperial infrastructure. So maybe trying to stop the ocean dumping, or trying to stop the nuclear weapons from proliferating and things like that. So taking pieces of it. And then 2023 is, we're talking about grounding nuclear imperialism. And we discussed a little bit about the limits of elimination, and our main, we are 1,000% behind the TPNW. The only issue that we're really seeing is how, even in the TPNW, it has to promote, there has to be this right to peaceful nuclear energy. And so we can still see those imaginaries. And what I was saying earlier about nuclear colonialism is, if we're going to address nuclear colonialism, it's not possible to just address it at the bomb detonation sites, or just address it at, the uranium mine, or just address it at the waste disposal site. The thing is that they're all connected. And so what we really want to encourage is to start to see the solidarities amongst all these spots, pieces on the map. And I don't have the map here, but one of our final maps is a map with no nation-state borders. So you just see all of those pieces on the map, and you can start to imagine what are possible solidarities that could emerge out of this, if we don't see that, if we don't see the borders, if we also don't see the difference between, the nuclear energy and then nuclear weapons, we notice those infrastructures that make them all possible. And thinking about sovereignty over land and who makes decisions about, the siting of these things and what happens if we give land back to indigenous peoples who it's been taken from, and they get to make decisions about, what kind of things happen on that land. So part of our project was also to make a group called Facing Nuclear, the feminist, anti-colonial, anti-imperial nuclear gathering, and we're really trying to support other researchers doing work in this space. So we're looking forward to sharing more with you. If you are interested, feel free to get in touch, and thank you so much for giving me the space to share with you.
Thank you so much, Carly. It's so nice for all of us to come together. We're sitting in a nuclear bunker in Tirana, Albania, and you're out in Auckland, New Zealand. And I think it's been productive, and I think it's been good to hear all these voices against nuclear weapons. But I'd like to invite Rinor again to the stage for his closing remarks. Rinor Jani, once again, the Program Director for the Nuclear Disarmament Advocacy and Research Program, Pathways to Peace.
Thank you to our distinguished panelists, to our distinguished moderator, and to all the attendees that are joining us in person and virtually. I'd like to first thank God. I'd like to thank Pathways to Peace. I'd like to thank Bunk Art One Museum. I'd like to thank our translators, our tech crew, New Politics, PR agency that helped us. I'd like to thank everyone that helped make this event and this forum a success. I hope that we all walk away with more knowledge and understanding of the important issue of nuclear weapons, and we have continued and increased leadership in the Balkans for nuclear disarmament. I'd like to also invite you to visit our website for more information about our nuclear disarmament advocacy and research program at pathways2peace.org/programs/Albania. Thank you so much. We can have a group photo. We can have a group photo with all the panelists together, if that's all right.
Recording stopped.